My name is Victor, and I never imagined that a family gathering could turn into the most terrifying and unforgettable day of my life. Because it all began on a quiet Saturday morning when I drove out to my brother's house to spend time with my family, the sun shining, birds chirping, everything seeming ordinary, even comforting. As I pulled into the driveway and noticed my nephew, Ethan, in the yard, mowing the lawn, looking unusually tense, and I waved, smiled, thinking perhaps he was just stressed from school or work. But as I stepped out of my car, a chill ran down my spine. Something in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward me, and I realized too late that something was off. Very off, and as I approached, he turned abruptly, and in his hand I saw the glint of a knife, and in that instant everything slowed. The world narrowing down to the sharp edge, the threat, the disbelief that the person who should have been laughing, joking, and sharing family meals could suddenly be a threat to my life, and I froze for a split second, registering the betrayal, the shock, the horror, and then instinct kicked in, years of training in self-defense. Quick reflexes I hadn't thought I possessed, and I moved, dodging the first lunge, heart hammering. Adrenaline flooding my system, mind racing, trying to understand why Ethan, my own nephew, would do this. What had driven him to this unimaginable act? And he lunged again, more recklessly this time, and I sidestepped, feeling the knife graze my jacket, a cold, metallic reminder of the danger. And I realized that the situation was life or death, that I needed to act quickly, strategically, because hesitation could cost me everything. And as I grabbed a nearby garden tool, a heavy metal rake, improvising, I kept my eyes locked on him, trying to gauge his intentions, his state of mind, and in those 5 minutes, the world felt like it had collapsed into a single, endless moment, time stretching, my heart thundering, every instinct screaming at me to survive, to protect myself, to stay alive, and I yelled, trying to reason with him, to reach whatever part of him was still rational, saying, "Ethan, stop, this isn't you. Put the knife down." But his eyes were wild, desperate, filled with anger and something I couldn't comprehend, something that had festered until it exploded into violence. And I realized then that words alone wouldn't stop him, that this confrontation required action, precision and courage, and I circled slowly, trying to put distance between us, to find an opening, and in that moment, I heard a voice calling my name. My brother rushing from the porch, panic on his face, and his presence momentarily distracted Ethan, giving me a split-second opportunity, a fleeting window to act, and I swung the rake carefully, aiming not to injure, but to disarm, to create leverage, and the metal collided with his arm, knocking the knife away, clattering to the driveway, and I lunged, using my body weight to hold him down, pinning him to the ground, heart racing, breaths ragged, realizing that in these moments, seconds felt like hours, and the adrenaline was both my ally and my enemy, sharpening my senses, but clouding the emotions threatening to overwhelm me, because this was my family, my own flesh and blood, and yet he had tried to end my life, and I had to keep him restrained until help arrived, until justice could intervene, until the situation was contained. And I heard the distant wail of sirens, neighbors calling, the chaos of the moment, and in that 5-minute stretch I felt everything. Fear, betrayal, anger, and a strange, sharp focus that honed me into survival mode. And when the police finally arrived, taking statements, securing the knife, and placing Ethan into custody, I felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. Because in those 5 minutes, my life had hung in the balance, and the reality that the person who had threatened me was someone I loved, someone I had nurtured, someone I had trusted, was a crushing weight. But justice, swift and decisive, had been served. Because the authorities acted promptly, charges were filed, and I knew that this event, as harrowing as it was, would not define the rest of my life. That survival and accountability had prevailed. And as I sat later that evening in my brother's now quiet home, reflecting on the morning's events, I thought about the fragility of trust, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the ways in which love and family can be both a source of strength and vulnerability, because Ethan's actions, though shocking and violent, were a wake-up call, a reminder that even within familiar faces, danger can lurk, that vigilance, awareness, and preparedness are crucial. And as I spoke with my brother, his eyes red from panic and relief, I realized that this family, like all families, had cracks and hidden tensions, and while nothing could erase the fear I had felt, nothing could undo the betrayal. The legal system, intervention, and the presence of law enforcement ensured that accountability would follow, that consequences would be faced, that lessons would be learned. And in the aftermath, as I examined the knife still glinting under the porch light, I understood that these 5 minutes had changed me, had tested my instincts, courage, and resilience, had revealed the depths of both human malice and the capacity for quick, decisive action in moments of extreme peril. And that day I had survived. I had faced a threat from within my own family, and I had ensured that justice, as swift as it could be under the circumstances, had been delivered because law enforcement acted. The judicial process began, and I knew that Ethan would have to answer for what he had attempted. And in that realization, a strange peace settled over me, and knowledge that while the scars of that morning would remain, both emotional and psychological, I had endured, I had acted, and the system had validated the danger, the wrong, and the need for accountability. And in reflecting on the incident, I also thought about prevention, communication, and awareness, about the warning signs that had been missed, the mental health struggles perhaps overlooked, the conversations that could have prevented escalation. And I vowed that moving forward, I would engage with my family differently, more vigilantly, more attentively, but with care and love. Because even though Ethan had crossed a line that should never be crossed, he was still my family. Still, someone whose life I hoped could be redirected through consequences, therapy, and accountability. And as I drove home that evening, hands still trembling from the adrenaline, heart still pounding, I realized that the phrase, "justice served," had never felt so immediate, so necessary, and so personal. Because those 5 minutes between threat and resolution had defined the boundary between life and death, between chaos and control, and between betrayal and accountability. And while the memory would haunt me, it also reinforced my faith in swift action, in preparedness, and in the institutions designed to intervene when human instincts and relationships break down. And as I sat in the quiet of my own home, replaying the events, I thought about survival, about courage, about the split-second decisions that save lives, and about the delicate balance between love for family and protection of self. And in that reflection, I felt both gratitude and sorrow, relief and mourning for the innocence lost. And yet, I also knew that by facing the danger head-on, by trusting my instincts, by acting decisively, I had preserved life, ensured justice, and perhaps even allowed for the possibility of redemption. And those 5 minutes, terrifying and intense as they were, became a defining moment in my life, a story of survival, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of justice in the face of betrayal and violence from someone I never imagined could harm me.